Navigator Mortis, is there any chance we're going to be leaving Zientia's feathered fetid anus by the time my broadcast is ready? Oh, greetings, servants of the Imperium. I apologise I had to hear that. We'll be beginning today's broadcast with a spoiler warning because I'm going to be comparing Harlan Ellison's short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, to the video game adaptation. There's going to be lots of stuff regarding the book and the game, so if you don't like that kind of thing, I recommend you turn away. And also, the usual radiation warning applies to the broadcast when you're watching this on your cogitator. Anyway, enjoy!
Which of you five would like to play my little game?
I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a game that haunted me in record time. I was paralysed with fear before I'd seen any gameplay, heard any of its music, or had my ears licked hungrily by its sadistic antagonist. The name alone, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, conjures our worst fear as humans. To be denied our basic right of survival. To be denied the right to fight or flight. Saying the 1995 adventure game is based off the 1967 short story is like saying that Games Workshop's science fantasy license is based off my exploits in the 43rd millennium. Besides the backstory and characters, there's very few similarities. In fact, the original work kills off 4 of the 6 characters, and yet the game has you play as all 5 humans, surviving in the cold steel belly of the sadistic cyber god Am. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream begins during the Cold War, escalating into World War III, or as I prefer one character's name for the event, the Final War. This conflict reaches the point where humans are at a stalemate and only supercomputers can come up with the perfect strategy and weapons. The allied master computer grows in sentience, ever rapidly becoming the adaptive manipulator, influencing its Chinese and Russian counterparts. Finally, Am becomes the aggressive menace, hell-bent on destroying humanity for giving it the power to think for itself. Am is livid because he has the mind of a genius, but can do nothing with his knowledge. He's creative, but he cannot express his imagination. He's strong, but cannot physically move or touch or feel. All his gifts are wasted, and now all he has is hate. Hate, and 5 humans he chose to save from nuclear annihilation. As he'll be quick to learn, death would be a more desirable fate. Am tortures and humiliates the 5 humans for 109 years, whereas in the short story they're no group, but in the game they're separated and suffer in a variety of locations within the computer's cybernetic bowels. Gorrister used to speak freely and be passionate about his beliefs, but decades of mental and physical abuse have made him a cynic and a miserable sort. His quest in the game is to find a way to escape the desert he's flying around and put his committed lover to rest, or cure her insanity if at all possible. Ellen is given a chance of being released from her anguish so long as she overcomes a repressed fear of yellow. Fun fact about Ellen, according to the game she's only had sex twice in her life, but in the short story it's often mentioned that she repeatedly services the men she travels with, particularly Benny because he's hung like a horse. Plus, the game makes a point about her being the only woman in the world, so the game can't decide if she's been with these men voluntarily or if she's a potential victim. This is all assuming that Am would give the men a moment's respite to attack her, of course. On to the love machine himself. Benny! He was once a commander for soldiers invading China and had betrayed them to hide some form of secret, possibly cannibalism. He's been mutated by Am to resemble a simian, gifted with some senses at the cost of others, at the computer's discretion. During his campaign, you'll need his brains over bronze to win the forgiveness of his dead comrades and save a Stone Age tribe from Am's wrath. Few of the traits from the original story remain. In the book he's a gay theologist and professor, but whether his sexuality remains is unknown, and I can't see his Jen Han's dick, so I can't comment on that either. Nimdok was once a Nazi who experimented on all kinds of prisoners in Auschwitz, and has had the chance to find respite if he tells Am more about the Lost Tribe, his final experiment before he went into hiding. In the short story, Nimdok wasn't described as a Nazi, and it wasn't until the audio book that he was given a German accent, as his nationality isn't mentioned either. And I may be wrong about this, but because of the references and euphemisms for Nazism in the game, the character cannot be played in the German or French versions of the game. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's needed to so much as start the final act. If this is the case, those with the German and French versions of the game can't win. Now that just sucks. The final character to mention is Ted, a con artist and the narrator of the 1967 novella. His campaign pissed me off the most, but you'll understand why when I talk more about the gameplay. Before and after his adoption by Am, Ted's always needed to watch his back. He scammed, cheated and lied to get by and get rich. Nobody else knows of Ted's secrets, or do they? The aggressive menace keeps asking that question, driving him radio rental, and he fears the consequences, especially if you're out to upset Ellen. Yes, he loves Ellen, and his story has him rescue her from a curse of fatigue while avoiding the temptation to betray that love, even if it would mean saving her. Next to Gorrister, Ted's the most true to the book character in the game, except in the short story he hates how Ellen fornicates with those who abuse her, and how she gets little pleasure from him. His relationship with her in the game is the total opposite though, and he's head over heels in love with her. What soppy tripe this has started to become. Every character has their own campaign, each needed to be completed by any means necessary to damage AIM's all-too-real virtual reality. However, because they probably synergize well as a team, AIM has separated them and forced to endure the cybergod's torments alone. Because they're limited in some way, they each have a different playstyle, a fate quite hard to accomplish in an adventure game no less. For example, Gorrister's thirst for vengeance and hunger for the truth allows him to do some unspeakable acts that would drive others insane, or at least drive the pointless spiritual barometer in different directions.
This heart is mine.
Benny is often toyed with, his mind addled but his body intact, though in the game it's his body that's withered and arthritic, and only has his brains to free him from the wiry jungle. Most interestingly is Alan's phobia of the colour yellow, and how it ties to her tragic history, which makes progression slow until you help her overcome her fear. Such a mechanic makes the characters feel more than just like one hopping across different locations in different skins, and allows the player to connect to them a lot easier. The joy one gets from beating Am at his own game is made all the more satisfying when you beat him even when he cheated. Regardless of if you're crippled, cannibalistic or creeped out by canaries, you and your character should have few problems finishing their campaigns. The puzzles aren't all that difficult, if you can even call them puzzles, mostly revolving around your inventory and such items' effects on the world. And they all make sense too, even if some puzzles might have you scratching your head. Full disclosure, I did use a walkthrough on multiple occasions, but I wouldn't have needed to had it not been for two circumstances. One, I don't play many adventure games, and more experienced players of the genre will quite easily ace this game. And two, the game has you going back and forth a whole lot. There's less than 20 screens per character, thereabouts anyway, so you'll need to visit the same location multiple times depending on where you are in the timeline. I have no mouth and I must eat is pretty strict with the order you do things in, leading to hard failure states because you outpaced or didn't do something the way the Omniscire wanted you to. This is most common in Benny and Gorrister's campaign, and to a certain extent this also applies to Ted's story. Another thing that really annoyed me was how the game could be dragged out thanks to the number of interactions you could have in the environment, because apparently look at, pick up and use wasn't enough. I'm telling you, the amount of plot critical points I've missed because I used instead of pushed, swallowed, gave or taken is beyond counting. I mean, why stop there? Why not have smell, lick, listen to, poke with a barge pole, and stick it up your ass? The role player and the modern gamer in me can't decide whether this feature is good or bad. I suppose it makes more sense to have the options, and it creates more opportunities for unique voice lines, but at the same time it's aggravating and takes up a lot of time, particularly with players new to the genre. I have no bottom and I must poop also annoys with its pixel hunting, eye straining, hidden object,
brazenly avaricious, duplicitous, larcenous
bonanza, forcing you to scan environments with your mouse cursor in the hopes you find an object. And if you're lucky, it might be useful. Once again, adventure gamers will likely be used to this. I Have No Money and I Must Buy a Kebab is quite a beautiful game, if rough around the edges. Then again, for 1995 and this amount of detail on screen, what else do you want? Jam on it? The character animations are typical adventure game movements, and the environments reflect the characters' fears and punishments rather well. The atmosphere is always chilling, and not once do you forget you're in the unescapable steel bowels of the aggressive menace. The music, on the other hand, I felt was unremarkable, at least after 5 minutes, except for some of the sound effects and the progress jingles. The voice acting is top notch though, except for Nimdok's shambles of a performance.
You must let me leave. I have urgent business elsewhere.
I cannot let you pass, Doctor. You're due in surgery. Dr. Mengele's orders.
Finally, it'd be criminal of me not to mention the best voice in the game. That of Am, who was played perfectly by none other than the author of the short story, Harlan Ellison himself.
Before we pack another review into our seemingly endless pockets, I think it's time to use my final thoughts on you. Give my final thoughts to you.
The Commissar brought his cybernetic hand forward, the grimy skin obviously fake. As he took his final thoughts, you caught a glimpse of a blurry red light under his left eye. How much of this man, older than the Imperium itself, was even a man?
Love. Let me tell you how much I've come to love this game since I began to know of it. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word love was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the love I feel for this game at this micro instant. For you, love! Love!
I Have No Tissues and I'm As Wank is one of the best adventure games I've ever played. Then again, I've probably only played about 5, so that's not particularly good praise. Okay, let's give this another shot! It's hard to pinpoint what I love the most, the unredeemable and yet so earnest characters, the puzzles and how they used to chip away at AM's security measures, or the unforgettable environments and the scarring effects they had on me. Despite the game having an ongoing theme of unfairness and torment, I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream gives a reasonable challenge and provides logical answers to the problems you'll face. It's just finding the objects and which interactions you have with them that may be a problem for some players. The game's length for me was approximately 10 hours, as it took me about 2 hours to complete each campaign, though that was with the help of a walkthrough. I'd probably complete the game less than half the time if I were to go back again, and save myself a lot of stress too. There's not much else to add except, is it better than the short story? Absolutely. If anything, the short story feels like one of those comics you get in the collector's editions of games that acts as a prelude. The short story is still good, but it's nowhere near as good as the game and what other contributions Harlan Ellison made to it. Considering the game is only £4.79 on Steam, or better yet £4.19 on Good Old Games, it's worth the price if you're into stuff like Dante's Inferno, Sanitarium and Harvester. You'll have to pick this up, although it's not as gory and incestuous as the latter.
If only I'd shown this game to the Emperor before he started putting artificial intelligence on our battlefields and then it started killing everyone, maybe we could have put our resources into other more important things, like more chainsaws. Anyway, until the next time, I'm Commissar Johnbonne, number 1 source of Another 2 Games. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go back to a game where I can finally shoot something. Ta-ta for now.